Hello and welcome to the Problems and Pitfalls of Plagiarism.
This short tutorial is designed to help you, the student, develop and construct written compositions by properly citing your sources.
By avoiding plagiarism, you can be sure that your work is your own and therefore stands a much better chance at receiving a higher grade.
So what exactly is plagiarism?
Plagiarism is using somebody's own thoughts, ideas, or feelings that are not your own.
Well, I believe plagiarism is copying another person's work or copying another student's information that's not yours.
Plagiarism is using someone else's work, thoughts, ideas, whatever as your own.
Plagiarism is taking someone else's words and using them as your own, which is lying.
Not cool.
Not cool at all.
Not good.
To plagiarize is to steal and pass off the ideas or words of another as one's own. It is using another's ideas without crediting the source. Have you ever copied and pasted information off the internet to use in your paper? Or have you ever written anything using someone else's ideas and passed them off as your own? Well, if you have, then you have plagiarized.
Anytime you use another person's words, thoughts, or ideas, you must cite or make reference to the source of your information, no matter where it was found or how you plan to use it. In a written assignment, in a PowerPoint presentation, even in a video production, you name it.
So why do people plagiarize?
Because it's easy. They're lazy. They don't want to actually sit there and do the work of reading it and then putting it into their own words.
Students plagiarize because maybe they don't have the time to do what they have to do, or maybe they want to get a really important, a good grade on what they have to do, or maybe they just didn't study at all.
Because it's easy.
I think it's just easy. It's easy for them to do, and they don't have to think.
And sometimes I think some students mean well, but they just get frustrated because they can't develop their own ideas, so they'll look at other ideas and think they're good and use them.
People plagiarize for many reasons. Sometimes people plagiarize because they're too lazy to take the time and effort that's required to research and write their own work. Students can often feel overwhelmed with their schoolwork. If you add in poor time management skills, they tend to panic when they know a paper is due, and so plagiarizing becomes a last-minute option. Some students haven't had experience writing research assignments. Many students lack the confidence to develop their own work, so they think that plagiarizing will get them a better grade than if they had written the paper themselves. Some students accidentally plagiarize because they're not sure how to cite sources. Maybe they never learned or they just never understood how to cite sources correctly. Without proper organizational skills, writers often forget where they found the information they used to compose their assignments, and so they end up plagiarizing because of sloppy note-taking and disorganized construction. Students also plagiarize because they don't understand the need to cite sources. Some cultures outside of the United States do not see plagiarism as a problem and believe that it's acceptable to share other people's ideas without their permission. However, remember that your failure to cite your sources can result in a failing grade for your assignment, a failing grade in a course, and even your expulsion from your college or university.
How can you avoid plagiarism?
Taking the idea from the work and making it into your own, paraphrasing it.
And when in doubt, always cite.
Well, I believe students can avoid plagiarism by studying, asking instructors for information that they don't know.
Always, like when in doubt, cite your work. Just make sure that your thoughts are your own, really.
Study hard.
Yeah, study hard on their own.
In-text citations.
Or you can use they have online tools where you can see if you're plagiarizing even if you don't know you're plagiarizing.
Exactly.
So.
However, there are ways that you can use information from other sources in your paper and still compose an academically sound paper. Just be sure to credit your sources by correctly quoting, paraphrasing, and summarizing the information that you borrow.
Crediting a source means that you acknowledge in your paper that you took words and ideas from another source. By crediting a source, you are letting your reader know that the information that you are using to support your paper has been borrowed from someone else.
One way to include borrowed information is through the use of a quotation. A quotation is an author's words used exactly as they are written. Use quotations sparingly. Student writers should use quotes only when the passage is written so powerfully that it shouldn't be rewritten or paraphrased. The passage includes highly technical information, or you want to analyze the author's words to support your point.
Now take a look at this sample. According to Shindetti, Sandler, Nelson, and Seaman, approximately 14 million women in the United States are battling with the disease anorexia nervosa, AN, which is described as one of the least understood and most intractable of all mental illnesses. By embedding a quotation into this sentence, what did the writer most likely want to stress? The powerful concept behind the words, highly technical information, or an analysis of the author's words? The correct answer is A, the powerful concept behind the words. The student writer chose to use this quotation, one of the least understood and most intractable of all mental illnesses, because the statement that anorexia nervosa is difficult to understand and to manage is a compelling idea that sounds best in the author's own words.
A second way to avoid plagiarism is to correctly paraphrase borrowed information. A paraphrase is a restatement of another person's words. Paul's going to tell a story and I'm going to paraphrase it.
This weekend, we took a family trip to New York. We went swimming, had a cookout, attended a family reunion, and overall had a great time.
To paraphrase, Paul and his family went to New York this past weekend where they enjoyed a lot of activities. Overall, everybody had a good time. Let's take a look at this sample. Exit cards are simple ways to assess if students have learned information at the end of a lesson. Students are asked to respond to 1 or 2 questions related to the daily learning objective or the learning process. Based on responses, teachers can quickly identify which students have or have not mastered the objective. Now here are 2 examples of how the previous information has been paraphrased. Which paraphrase is correct? Paraphrase number 1. One way to assess if students have learned information is to give them exit cards at the end of a lesson. Students can respond to 1 or 2 questions about the teacher's learning objective or learning process. Looking at the responses, teachers can see which students have or have not learned the objective. Paraphrase number 2. Teachers can often assess student learning through the use of exit cards. By having students answer 1 or 2 questions on an exit card at the end of class, teachers can recognize immediately those students who might be having trouble understanding the material. The correct answer is number 2. So what's wrong with paraphrase number 1? First, much of the wording is identical to the original. Be sure that you demonstrate your understanding of the original work by rewriting in your own words. Second, the structure of each sentence is too similar to the original. Remember that not only words, but sentences must be rewritten when developing your own paper. And third, the citation at the end of the sentence does not include the date of the original work. When crediting a source, students must always include the name of the author and the date of the original work.
A third way to avoid plagiarism is to correctly summarize borrowed information.
A summary is a condensed form of information. Paul's going to tell a story, and I'm going to summarize it.
A few months ago, while driving home from work, my car started to give me problems. After pulling off to the side of the road, I tried to restart the car, but it wouldn't start. The next day, I tried to return to my car, but unfortunately it had been towed. In addition to that, I had to pay $150 in order to get it out of storage because I was parked near a fire hydrant. Turned out I also had to pay $200 for a new alternator.
To summarize Paul's story, Paul's car broke down and it cost them a lot of money.
Now let's take a look at the previous sample again. Exit cards are simple ways to assess if students have learned information at the end of a lesson. Students are asked to respond to 1 or 2 questions related to the daily learning objective or the learning process. Based on responses, teachers can quickly identify which students have or have not mastered the objective. Here are 2 examples of how the previous information has been summarized. Which summary is correct? Summary number 1. In 2012, Cassell Gianola discussed the idea of placing a few questions related to the daily learning objective on exit tickets for teachers to assess whether or not students have mastered the objective. Summary number 2. Cassell Gianola found that presenting a few closing questions on an exit ticket is an easy method for teachers to assess whether or not students have understood the objective of the lesson. The correct answer is summary number 2. So what's wrong with summary number 1? First, the date is used incorrectly. As written, the date does not indicate that the information is part of the author's research. It also implies that the author endorsed the idea in 2012, but might not endorse it today. Second, some of the words and phrases are identical to the original. As with paraphrasing, summarizing requires the student to rephrase ideas in his or her own words when using an author's original material. Third, the substance or idea of the original work has been lost. Summary number 1 tells us that the author discussed exit tickets, but nowhere does the summary state the simplicity or effectiveness of the idea.
We hope that you enjoyed and learned something about plagiarism by watching this video.
And remember that while your teachers do want you to cite your sources, they're more interested in what you have to say. So remember to always cite your sources to support your thesis and main idea.
And now, since everybody enjoys a good quiz, take a moment to see how much you remember about the problems and pitfalls of plagiarism. Remember, only you can prevent plagiarism.